Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The message appeared on a Wednesday morning, nestled between a pharmacy coupon and a reminder about overdue library rentals. Just a straightforward subject line, hoping you're well and wondering if I might drop by. The sender was David. David, it had been approximately 5 years since Thomas had died, maybe longer. Time becomes fluid after such profound loss. David wasn't merely an acquaintance. He was Thomas's closest companion since their elementary school days, the other half of their unbreakable duo. They'd endured playground mishaps, shared first tastes of alcohol, navigated university dormitories together, and eventually David had served as groomsman at our ceremony. Seeing his name appear triggered an unexpected surge within me, a blend of comfort and a sudden piercing wave of sorrow I hadn't experienced so intensely in recent months. The house seemed especially silent that afternoon, the fading autumn sunlight streaming through the front room windows, highlighting tiny specks floating in the air, remnants of the existence Thomas and I had created, now frozen in motionless space. I examined the message again. He explained he'd be traveling through the region for a business meeting roughly an hour distant and wondered if I might be willing to receive a visit for just an afternoon, perhaps share some coffee and conversation. It seemed harmless enough, courteous even, yet my stomach churned with peculiar anxiety. Following Thomas's passing, the initial wave of support phone calls, home-cooked meals, visitors had gradually diminished to barely a stream, then essentially ceased. Not from cruelty, I believe, but because existence for others naturally progressed forward. David had delivered flowers, telephoned several times during those initial devastating weeks, his voice heavy with mutual anguish. But then quietness arrived. I hadn't initiated contact either. What could be said? We were connected through Thomas. And without him, the bond seemed damaged, uncomfortable. Part of me wanted to decline, to preserve my peaceful routine undisturbed. Grief creates protective barriers around your isolation. Yet another part, a smaller, stirring part I hadn't acknowledged much, felt a spark of wonder. David understood Thomas in ways I never could. The childhood mysteries, the youthful escapades. Perhaps conversing with him would feel like recovering a small fragment of Thomas. Just for one afternoon, I composed a brief response. David, it would be wonderful to see you. Please let me know which day suits you best. His answer arrived promptly Thursday afternoon, planning to arrive around mid-afternoon. Suddenly my peaceful home seemed too quiet, too neglected, too saturated with Thomas's absence. I spent the following days in an unusual burst of energy, not merely cleaning but organizing, adjusting photographs on walls, including the large portrait from our wedding where David stood grinning beside Thomas. I even purchased fresh flowers, something I hadn't done purely for myself in ages. Daffodils, Thomas's preferred blooms, their intense fragrance filled the entrance hall like a scented memory. Why was I so nervous? This was simply David, gentle, reliable David with his comfortable laughter and somewhat disheveled appearance. That never seemed to alter. Was I concerned about stirring up agonizing recollections? Or was it something else, something more difficult to identify, a fear of confronting how drastically life had transformed, seeing Thomas's absence mirrored in his closest friend's expression? Thursday arrived bright and crisp. I dressed thoughtfully, selecting a simple green cardigan Thomas had always admired. I prepared coffee, arranging biscuits on a dish, the type my grandmother used to bake, the ones Thomas and David would consume eagerly after classes. The timepiece moved toward mid-afternoon with tortuous slowness. Then, precisely punctually, a humble automobile pulled into the drive. My heart performed an odd little leap. Taking a deep breath, I opened the entrance door just as David was extending his hand toward the chime. He appeared more mature, naturally, additional silver woven through his brown hair, deeper creases carved around his eyes, but the smile remained identical, genuine, slightly uncertain. Anna, he said, his voice quieter than I recalled. It's wonderful to see you. You as well, David, I managed, stepping aside. Please, come inside. He entered the house, his attention moving around the recognizable corridor, pausing momentarily. On the wedding photograph, I observed a flash of melancholy cross his features before he concealed it with another smile. Place appears wonderful, just the same, primarily, I said, guiding him toward the front room. Some elements change, some remain constant, I suppose. We settled him on the couch, me in the chair across from Thomas's chair. An uncomfortable silence extended momentarily, filled only by the ticking timepiece and the subtle scent of daffodils. He cleared his throat. So, how have you been managing? Truly? The frankness surprised me, but I valued it. No empty phrases. No, avoiding the enormous issue in the room, the massive Thomas-shaped void in both our existences. I took a breath, choosing honesty. It's manageable, David. Some days are superior to others. You understand how it is. I fidgeted with the corner of a pillow. It's more silent than I ever imagined possible. He nodded slowly, his eyes filled with comprehension. Indeed, I still reach for the telephone sometimes, thinking I'll contact him about some trivial thing I witnessed or a sports result. Then I recall. He looked down at his hands. It creates such an enormous quietness, doesn't it? And just like that, the discomfort began dissolving, replaced by the shared vocabulary of loss. We discussed Thomas then easily, naturally. David shared an anecdote about a camping expedition they took as adolescents, one I'd never heard, involving an overturned boat and a very irritated goose. I laughed, a genuine, authentic laugh that felt unused but pleasant. I told him about Thomas's catastrophic attempt at creating homemade pasta during the early period of our marriage, resulting in something resembling petrified clay. We spent the afternoon like that, exchanging memories like valuable gems, each one bringing Thomas vividly back into the room, not as a source of anguish, but as the affectionate, amusing, slightly infuriating man we both had cherished. David inquired about my position at the bookstore, about my vegetable garden, listening carefully. He seemed genuinely curious, not merely creating polite discussion. He observed the minor modifications, the new shelving unit, the different drapery in the eating area. You were painted in here? He asked, gesturing toward the kitchen walls. Now, a gentle mint color instead of the bright orange Thomas had preferred. Yes, I smiled. Felt like time for a change. Orange was never truly my preference. He chuckled. Tell me about it. Thomas painted our university apartment kitchen that identical shade. Said it was cheerful. It primarily just strained my vision in the mornings. We moved into the kitchen for additional coffee. As I poured, David leaned against the counter, gazing out the window at the rear yard. The afternoon illumination was diminishing, casting lengthy shadows across the grass. He cherished this garden, David said quietly. Spent hours out here, didn't he? He did, I confirmed, handing him a cup, especially the vegetable patches. He was so proud of them. David turned from the window, his expression contemplative. You know, Anna, he began somewhat hesitantly, part of the reason I wanted to visit, well, besides seeing you, naturally there was something Thomas asked me to do long ago. He made me give my word. My forehead creased. A promise? Thomas hadn't mentioned anything to me. What was it? David took a sip of his coffee, collecting his thoughts. It was right after he received his initial serious diagnosis, the one they believed they'd conquered. We were having a drink late one evening, and he became reflective. Frightened, I think, though he attempted not to reveal it. He paused, looking me directly in the eyes. He made me promise that if anything ever occurred to him, I'd visit you. Not just immediately, but later on. Make certain you were truly well. He hesitated again, and he asked me to give you something, but only when I felt the moment was appropriate. My heart gave another strange jolt. Something he wanted David to give me? Why wouldn't he have presented it to me himself, or left it with his legal documents? What is it? I asked, my voice barely audible. David reached into the inner pocket of his coat and withdrew a small, weathered leather-bound notebook. It wasn't a book for reading, it appeared more like a diary or journal, secured by a thin leather cord. It looked aged, softened with handling. He extended it to me. He called it his appreciation journal, David explained gently. He began it way back, even before he met you, I believe. Wrote down things he was grateful for, moments that held meaning. He wasn't always the most eloquent at expressing things aloud, especially the profound things. He said this contained the thoughts he didn't always understand how to voice, and he wanted you to have it eventually. I accepted the journal, my fingers trembling slightly as they touched his. The leather was soft, almost silky, shaped by years of being held. It felt warm, intimate, a tangible piece of Thomas I never knew existed. I traced the worn cover, a knot forming in my throat. Why hadn't he told me? Why give it to David? Perhaps he knew I wouldn't be prepared to read it immediately. Perhaps he needed the cushion of time, and David, his loyal friend, was the guardian of that time. He said you'd know when to read it. David continued, his voice tender. Or if you even wish to. No pressure. But he wanted you to have the choice. I pressed the small book to my chest, a sudden wave of emotion washing over me. Grief, yes, but also a profound sense of being understood, of being loved across the years, across the silence of death itself. Tears stung my eyes. Thank you, David, I whispered, the words thick. Thank you for keeping this safe, for bringing it. He simply nodded, a deep understanding in his gaze. We stood there in the quiet kitchen, the fading light painting the room in shades of gold and gray, the unspoken weight of Thomas's life, his love, and his foresight filling the space between. Us.it wasn't merely a journal, it was a message, a connection, delivered by the one person Thomas trusted completely. The unexpectedness of the gift, the depth of Thomas's planning, and David's quiet fulfillment of his promise, it was overwhelming, but in a strangely comforting way. David cleared his throat gently. There's one more thing, Anna, part of the promise. I looked up, curious. He made me promise I'd help you repair the garden shed door if it was still jamming. I blinked, then let out a watery chuckle. The shed door, it had been sticking for years, a minor irritation Thomas always intended to fix but never found time for. It seemed such a small, ordinary detail after the gravity of the journal. It's still jamming, I admitted, a small smile touching my lips. Always, David grinned, the familiar sparkle returning to his eyes. Some things never change. He glanced at the clock on the counter. Look, I probably should depart soon, head toward the conference hotel. But if you've got a wrench, and maybe some lubricant, I could take a quick look. For Thomas, it felt right, a practical task, a shared moment of repairing something tangible after dealing with so much intangible emotion. It felt like Thomas. I think I have just the things, I said, leading the way to the cluttered drawer beside the rear door where Thomas kept his tools. We went out into the cool evening air. The door, wooden and weathered, groaned in protest as David examined its hinges. He adjusted the latch, tightened several screws, and applied some lubricant I found in the storage area. We didn't speak much, working side by side in comfortable silence, the only sounds the metallic scrape of the wrench and the chirping of insects starting their evening chorus. There was a simple satisfaction in the task, a quiet companionship. He was fulfilling a promise, and I was allowing him. It was a small act, but it felt significant, a bridge between the past and the present. He swung the door open and closed several times. It moved smoothly, silently. There, he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. Good as new, or at least better than it was. He turned to me, a genuine smile on his face. Promise kept. The sun had dipped below the trees now, painting the sky in strokes of rose and violet. A profound sense of peace settled over me, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Standing there with David, Thomas's oldest friend, having received this unexpected piece of my husband's heart and witnessing the simple act of loyalty, felt like a turning point. David gathered his jacket from the kitchen chair. The atmosphere felt different now, lighter, warmer. The initial awkwardness was long gone, replaced by a renewed sense of connection, not just through Thomas but between us. Thank you, Anna, he said sincerely, pausing at the door, for letting me visit, for sharing the afternoon. Thank you, David, I replied, meeting his gaze. For everything. The journal, the door, just talking. He nodded. Take care of yourself, Anna, and don't be a stranger, okay? If you ever feel like talking or need anything. You too, David, I said. He gave a small wave and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away, the red taillights disappearing down the quiet street. Closing the door, I leaned against it for a moment, the small leather-bound journal still clutched in my hand. The house didn't feel quite so empty anymore. The silence seemed gentler, less absolute. David's visit, unexpected as it was, had brought more than just memories. It brought connection, closure of a kind I hadn't anticipated, and the tangible proof of Thomas's enduring love in the form of the journal. I walked back into the front room, now bathed in the soft glow of the lamps I'd switched on. I sat in my own chair this time, not Thomas's, and placed the journal on the side table. I wasn't ready to open it yet, not tonight, but knowing it was there, knowing David had honored his promise, felt like a gift. It wasn't about replacing Thomas or erasing the grief. It was about understanding that connections can endure, that friendship can bridge the gap left by loss, and that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can bring the most profound comfort. Life hadn't magically become easy, but something had. shifted within me. A window had opened, letting in a little light, a little air. It was a reminder that even after the deepest loss, life holds possibilities for connection, for understanding, and for quiet growth. And sometimes it starts with an old friend stopping by, fulfilling a promise, and helping you fix a sticking door.